Slowly but surely, the Department of Education and the National Council for Special Education are retreating from special education in mainstream schools and are consistently, in my view, undermining it in terms of developing wrong models. And special education in the country at the moment, Taoiseach, is under-resourced and is not prioritised by the government. And I've met with parents of children with special needs, I've met with the principals of special schools, and I've met with principals of mainstream schools who cater comprehensively in their own ways for children with special needs. The National Education Psychological Service is grossly under-resourced and needs more psychologists. As an example, every school is limited to the number of psychological assessments it can get a year. So a school, for example, is limited, that I met yesterday, to 3 a year. It actually has children, it needs 20 on average a year, and it's told you can only have 3. And that's across the system. The wait for occupational therapists for children in special education is about 2 years. For speech and language therapy, over a year. There's no ongoing intervention for children on the autistic spectrum in special classes, providing for autism in mainstream schools. And now, Taoiseach, the new general allocation model that's being proposed is causing enormous concern to principals and to teachers, and will shock many parents in terms of what is proposed. Because essentially, the whole concept of a resource teacher for children with special needs will disappear. They want a general allocation model now in the interest of administrative simplicity, and that's what will happen. And they're saying there will be no more need for professional diagnosis. And they think this is a good thing.
Question, please.
At the moment, parents are waiting. Of course parents are waiting, because there's not adequate resource base put into the assessment and diagnosis of children from an early age with special needs. So the new proposal is, take in the children, we'll give you a general allocation model, you can intervene even without a professional diagnosis of a child. And it is also, of course, shoving everything back to the parent, because the parent will be able to appeal, but to who? To the Board of Management, to the school, and so on. I want to ask you, Taoiseach, what research has gone into this? What research underpins this new general allocation model? And I would ask you, Taoiseach, that the government not proceed with this particular model and would instead start resourcing the existing system far better than it has. And in the first instance, would you agree to increase the number of psychologists available to the National Education Psychological Service so that they can get involved much more readily and effectively with schools in assessing children from the get-go?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
We're spending, I think, 1.4 billion in this area in general. We have more resource teachers and more SNAs than ever before. And obviously this is a priority for parents and a priority for the Minister for Education. I don't accept that children should not have access to professional assessment. Clearly, if there's a problem with a child, it's critical that they have access to professional assessment to see what the nature of that challenge might be. So perhaps, Deputy, in respect of the general allocation model that you speak of, I think this is an issue that's worthy of a discussion. Insofar as the increased funding is concerned, increased availability to professional assistance. Yes, I accept that there are delays in respect of speech and language therapy and in psychological assessment, but I don't accept at all any model that would say that you can't have access to professional assessments for children. Surely nobody knows a child better than their parent, and if there is a difficulty, it's very important to determine what that is. So there is a 1.4 billion spend here, Cancorla, and I'd be happy to facilitate a discussion about the general allocation model that you refer to, Deputy Martin.
Deputy Martin, thank you.
I find your response extraordinary, because no one seems to know what's going on in government. You're saying you can't understand the idea of a child not needing a professional diagnosis, but that's what you're proposing. That's what the Minister is proposing. This is the document. There was a meeting of 500 people recently in UCC being briefed by the Special Education Council. And it's saying one of the benefits of the new system is that parents won't have to wait for a professional diagnosis anymore. So the idea is that you have an education intervention without any professional diagnosis of the child. That's what you're proposing, teacher. And the best you can say is we'll have a discussion. This is... Sorry? Sorry, yes. I won't have time in a minute to read all this. Look, it's an ILSA annual conference delivering to students with special education needs a better and more equitable way. It's sort of... But this is your document, Minister. Sorry. I mean, no waiting...
Sorry, we can't have documents being displayed in the chamber.
No waiting for diagnosis. No unnecessary labelling.
Sorry, Deputy. You know the rules as well as I do. Thank you. This is leaders' questions. We're over to.
What rule?
Please put the question.
Taoiseach asked me to read it out.
Well, I mean,
the document.
I happen to be in the chair. I happen to be in the chair. Thanks very much. Would you put your question, please? Thank you.
But the point, Taoiseach, is this.
Shh, will you stay quiet?
The entire situation, if you looked at the circular last year in terms of special needs assistance, you look at this. This is a fundamental retreat from special education in mainstream education. This is what this amounts to. It's talking about standardised tests, social context. The whole idea of a special ring-fenced, child-centred based approach to special education is going out the window. And that phrase, unnecessary labelling, is insulting to parents. You do actually need a definition.
Sorry, would you put your question?
Teacher, thank you. If you're on an autistic spectrum, that's not an unnecessary label. You do need to know that. A parent needs to know where the child is on a particular spectrum. If you're Down syndrome, it's not an unnecessary label. It has implications in terms of education requirements and provision. So the whole thing, Taoiseach, is stealthily endeavouring to undermine the edifice that has been built up over the last 15 years.
Thank you.
And certainly needs ongoing review and change.
Thank you.
But not this kind of stuff.
Taoiseach.
Removed from people working at the coalface. And there's a lot more I could say about it, Taoiseach. But what really frightens me, Taoiseach, is your detachment and disconnection with what your own government are proposing in relation to these issues. I'd ask you to change it and to stop it.
You go on with this, this usual spiel every week. Now, for your information, in case you didn't realise it, this government was the first to appoint a senior minister for children. This government was the first to set up a Department of Children. This government was the only government to have a referendum of the people giving children their rights as citizens. This government has children as a central priority of its focus. I do not accept from you or from anybody else, I do not accept it, I don't care what model you're reading from, that professional assessment of children is not necessary to determine what their particular challenge is. The focus has to be on meeting the needs of the child, on meeting the needs of the child. And you can twist the words any way you like, Deputy Martin. I don't accept it from you. Your weekly rant about detachment. This government made children the focus of political responsibility, their own department, their own senior minister, their own funding, and what's involved here, Deputy Martin, for your information, is to determine what are the needs of each individual child. And I do not accept from you or from anybody else that a child that has a problem should not have a professional assessment of what that challenge is.